water bodies like maybe rivers, ponds, lakes, springs, anything. Water from those water bodies evaporate and form water vapor. So in this process of evaporation, water vapor forms, and this as the water vapor moves into the sky, it gets condensation happens. So in this water cycle, water bodies undergo evaporation in the form of water vapor. So as that water vapor goes up into the sky, it gets condensed and forms tiny droplets of water. Because as you go up, the air expands and cools, forming condensation. This condensation results in formation of tiny droplets of water. As these tiny droplets further get condensed, they form big droplets of water. These big droplets of water cool down and form rain. This results in the formation of rain. Rain comes back to the earth again. So this rain water again goes and mixes up into the sea water via the rivers. The rain water goes and mixes up into the sea water via rivers. So but we see seas or oceans never dry up. In the process of evaporation, we never see seas or oceans never dry up. So this rainwater, when it goes to the sea, what happens? Not all the rainwater goes and mixes into the sea via the rivers. Some amount of water goes into the soil and further forms underground water, gets absorbed into the ground. So this underground water, again it forms the surface water through the springs. Suppose if you dig a borewell or a tube well, again the underground water comes up. So this is a cycle. So water bodies evaporate in the form of water vapor. The evaporate water vapor goes up into the sky. It undergoes condensation because the air cools down and expands the water. In the further process of condensation, the water forms tiny droplets. These tiny droplets undergo again condensation and form big droplets of water. These big droplets of water cool down to form rain. The rainwater goes and mixes up into the sea water via rivers. But we see seas and oceans never dry up in this process of evaporation. What happens to the rainwater? The complete rainwater doesn't go and mixes up into the sea. Some amount of water goes and gets absorbed by the soil. From the soil, it gets absorbed by the ground and forms the underground water. Then this underground water sometimes comes up as surface water through springs. Again, if you dig a borewell or a tube well in your house, then this underground water comes as a surface water. Then let us look at another aspect of water cycle. The water which flows through the rocks. What happens when the water is flowing from the rocks? The mineral content of the rock gets dissolved into the water, making the water mineral rich. So when the water is flowing via rocks, the mineral content of the rocks gets dissolved in the water, making the water nutrient rich. So in this process, when the rainwater via rivers goes and mixes into the sea, the water is getting mineral rich. So let us see another aspect of water cycle. Water, while flowing through the rivers, gets mixed up with the rocks, and these rocks contains minerals. So these minerals make the water nutrient rich. So these minerals get dissolved in the water, the minerals from the rocks. So what happens in this process, where the rainwater is going to the sea, mixing up with the land water, that is via rivers. When this water is going to the sea, it mixes up with the minerals of the rocks, making the water mineral rich. So this mineral rich water, when it goes into the sea, the mineral rich water is used by the marine organisms for its living purposes, for food or anything. So this is how this diagram explains you the water cycle. The groundwater is evaporated, and then in the process of condensation comes back as a rain or snow. Then again, this is sun, this is air, this is clouds. And animals and plants also participate in this cycle. Transpiration occurs from the plants. Water evaporates from the plants in the form of water vapor, goes into the sky and comes back as the rain. So this is what it explains the water cycle. The next process will be nitrogen cycle. So what is biogeochemical cycle? A constant interaction between biotic and abiotic components. The relationship and interrelationship between them explains the biogeochemical cycle. So water cycle, nitrogen cycle, carbon cycle, oxygen cycle, all these are examples of biogeochemical cycle. So the previous cycle we did was water cycle, that was also part of biogeochemical cycle. So the next part what we are going to deal is nitrogen cycle. So you know nitrogen. Nitrogen accounts for 78% of the total atmospheric gas. So it is a nutrient essential for the life. So nitrogen accounts for 78% of the total atmospheric gas and it is an essential nutrient for life. So where is it found? It is found in DNA and RNA, deoxyribonucleic acid and riboxynucleic acid. It is present in your chromosomes. It determines the protein structure. So this is vitamins. This is urea and alkaloids. In the fertilizers and pesticides, if you need nitrogen, you add urea, and alkaloids in the manufacturing of some medicines also you use nitrogen. So all life forms use nitrogen directly except leguminous plants. So all life forms can't use this nitrogen directly for their use except leguminous plants. Leguminous plants have nitrogen fixing bacteria in their roots. Like example is rhizobium bacteria. They can fix the atmospheric nitrogen directly and they can use it for their plants. So except for the leguminous plants, all life forms cannot use nitrogen directly. They need to be converted into some another forms. So the atmospheric nitrogen will be converted into nitrites and nitrates. These are the oxides of nitrogen. So the atmospheric nitrogen will be converted into nitrates and nitrites. This process is called nitrification. So this is done in the presence of lightning and under high pressure and temperature. Under high pressure and temperature, atmospheric nitrogen will be converted into nitrates and nitrites. These are called the oxides of nitrogen. This is done in the presence of high pressure, high temperature and lightning. This process is called nitrification. Then these nitrates and nitrites, that means the oxides of nitrogen, get dissolved in water and forms acid, nitrous acid and nitric acid. Then what happens? This nitrous acid and nitric acid come down in the form of rain and then they are further used by living organisms. So nitrogen cannot be used directly in that elemental form by the organisms. They get converted into oxides of nitrogen called nitrites and nitrates in the presence of lightning, high temperature and high pressure. Then these nitrates and nitrites, they dissolve in water and form nitric and nitrous acid. These nitric and nitrous acid come back to the land in the form of rain. Then these are further used by all the living organisms. Then talking about plants. So these nitrates and nitrites in the plants get converted into amino acids to make proteins. Nitrates and nitrites in the plants, that means oxides of nitrogen in the plants, get converted into amino acids to make proteins. This process is called ammonification. Then talking about animals, when the animal dies, its body gets decayed and decomposed and goes back into the soil and degrades. So when animal dies, the body degrades, decomposes and goes back into the soil. With the presence of some bacteria, it gets decomposed, degraded and mixes into the soil. So in the presence of some bacteria, the body of the animal will be converted into compounds of nitrogen. Definitely the body of animal contains some amount of nitrogen. So the nitrogen will be converted into compounds of nitrogen, that is nitrates and nitrites. Again, with the help of one another type of bacteria, these nitrates and nitrites will be converted back into the elemental form of nitrogen. So this process is called denitrification. So here the atmospheric nitrogen has been converted into oxides and acids of nitrogen, but when the plant dies, the elements of nitrogen, that is nitrates and nitrates, with the help of some bacteria, get back converted into elemental nitrogen in the soil. So this process is denitrification. So ammonification, nitrification and denitrification. This is what about nitrogen cycle. So let's move to the next topic, that is carbon cycle.